So he's saying that you can't give across the board complete principles for this stuff. You just have to sort of play it by ear, as it were, look at reality in each situation. He's being pragmatic about it. And then we skip just a little bit. The agents themselves must in each case consider what is appropriate to the occasion, as happens also in the art of medicine or navigation. Then we skip just a little bit. First, then, let us consider this, that it is the nature of such things to be destroyed by defect and excess, as we see in the case of strength and health. For to gain light on things imperceptible, we must use the evidence of sensible things. We must use sensory evidence. Now, that's an interesting foray into epistemology right there. To gain light on things imperceptible, to gain information, to cast light on things that are not available to the senses, imperceptible, cannot be perceived. To find out about these things, we must use the evidence of sensible things. If you cannot figure it out through the senses, then you can only figure it out through things that can be figured out through the senses. Let's use an example. It's all floating. If you cannot pick up an atom and see how the shape of it and where the electrons are going, if that's too small, if your eyeballs and your fingertips and everything's too big to get a handle on, subatomic particles or atomic particles and stuff, well, what we can do is we can use machines that are sensitive enough, and they can amplify that sensitivity onto a screen or something like that that is available to our eyes or our ears or whichever. Geiger counters are something that take an imperceptible, you can't even tell it's there with your five senses, an imperceptible thing, and they give it a voice, a spooky voice. So in order to gain light or get information on things that are not available to the senses, you have to go through things which are available through the senses. Fine. Both excessive and defective exercise destroys the strength. Right? People who run every single day on asphalt and don't use good shoes and stuff, they get shin splints and stuff like this. People who just lift weights all the time end up ruining their joints and things. And then you're just as bad off if you don't exercise at all. And similarly, drink or food, which is above or below a certain amount, destroys the health, while that which is proportionate, both produces and increases and preserves it, health. So too is it, then, in the case of temperance and courage and other virtues. For the man who flies from fear of everything and does not stand his ground against anything becomes a coward. So he's going too far in that direction. And the man who fears nothing at all but goes to meet every danger becomes rash. And similarly, the man who indulges in every pleasure and abstains from none becomes self-indulgent, while the man who shuns every pleasure, as boors do, B-O-O-R, becomes in a way insensible. Temperance and courage, then, are destroyed by excess and defect, and preserved by the mean, the middle of the road, the golden mean. But not only are the sources and causes of their origination and growth the same as those of their destruction, but also the sphere of their actualization will be the same. But this is also true of the things which are more evident to sense. Example given of strength. Strength is produced by taking much food, undergoing much exertion, and it is the strong man that will be most able to do these things. So, in other words, it is something of a self-feeding cycle. And if we carry this analogy over to virtue in ethics, a strong man is going to be able to do things that require his strength. A good man will have the strength so-called, to be able to do what is most difficult, but the right thing to do, the good thing to do. So it's self-feeding cycle. It's self-reinforcing, reinforcing cycle. So too is it with the virtues. By abstaining from pleasures, we become temperate. and it is when we have become so that we are most able to abstain from them. Right? And similarly too in the case of courage, for by being habituated to despise things that are terrible and to stand our ground against them, we become brave. And it is when we have become so that we shall be most able to stand our ground against them. Now, I just have to interject just a moment. I have had that experience with what I would consider the virtue of speaking my mind and speaking up and not being taken to agree with or accede to something that's said in my presence. I speak up when it's not welcome. I speak up, a lot of people would say, too often. When I was in college, I used to interrupt classes in the middle of classes, got up and walked out of some. Nearly got kicked out of some, just about got in a fist fight with the sociology professor because he was saying kids in Africa, their economies are just fine and their economies are working fine. So I got in the habit of speaking up about these things, and it got to the point where it wasn't, it's not some sort of decision. It's not a hard decision to make. Here's somebody saying something I don't like. My heart rate goes up and I get a chill up my spine, and I interrupt him and I start speaking loudly and rudely, and it messes up diplomacy. Everybody who's into diplomacy and being nice and polite and getting people to like you, they don't like my approach. Fine. It messes with diplomacy, but it gets my point across, and I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong when I speak up against crap that's evil or, evil in some way. I don't feel like I'm doing anything wrong when I speak up against it. And it's by exercising that muscle, as it were. It's by exercising that virtue every time I come to a chance that I get used to it, that I get to the point where it's just automatic. Or when I'm facing opposition from people. Is it a big conundrum? Figure out what I gotta do. It takes days to figure out what's my change of plans gonna be. It's not like that anymore. It's like I expected it. It's an uphill battle all the way. Perseverance is the virtue I'm talking about there. That no matter what changes, and no matter who changes, and what their attitude changes, and no matter who struggles against you, and you thought people for you, and then they're against you, and people who were against you now don't even care, and strange how things change, but you've got to persevere. And if you make a habit of persevering, then the next time you come up against a hard or difficult situation, it'll be that much easier to persevere. If you make it a habit of telling the truth when it's going to be difficult, then the next time you come up against that, you'll say, "That's a pill I got to swallow," and you'll do it. If you just make a habit of virtues, you'll find that they become easier and easier to practice. We must take as a sign of states of character the pleasure or pain that ensues on acts. In other words, when you take an action, you'll either have pleasure or pain or possibly indifference. And we must take these as a sign of character. A really sick example would be the Gorky Park murder, or the Soviet-era murder. He was arrested in like 1990, I think, mass murderer. And he would spontaneously ejaculate, he said, when he was cutting people, biting. His mom raised him with stories of cannibalism from the 1930s, and so lo and behold, he becomes a 40-year-old man, and he's obsessed with eating people's hearts and muscles and body parts and stuff. So when you cut somebody, I've never cut somebody, but let's say you do, there's a broad range of things that you might feel. You might feel relief, that the guy's not going to kill you now, or you might feel fear now that the law is going to be after you, depending on the situation, right? Or you might ejaculate. So we have to take that as a sign of character, of what the person responds when they do a certain thing, a certain action. What is the response that they have? What's their feeling? What is the pleasure or pain that ensues the act? For the man who abstains from bodily pleasures and delights in this very fact is temperate. Delights in abstaining, we call that Spartan now. While the man who is annoyed at it is self-indulgent. And he who stands his ground against things that are terrible and delights in this, or at least is not pained, is brave. While the man who is pained, given pain by fear and